Welcome to season 2 of Amsterdam Talk. This week I have a very special guest in the house tonight. We're going to be talking about a lot of things from cross-cultural connections to reparations, interracial dating, and the fear of Black unity. I got Dr. Ray Winbush in the building today. How you doing, Dr. Winbush?
I'm doing fine, Rod. Good to be here.
All right. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, I'm director of the Institute for Urban Research at Morgan State University in Baltimore, which has been declared a national treasure. This is my fourth HBCU. I taught at Fisk, Alabama A&M, and Oakwood. Taught at Vanderbilt University. I've got students that I'm very proud of who have graduated. Michelle Alexander, who wrote the book, The New Jim Crow, about mass incarceration in the United States. Charles King, who's the president of Macro, one of the second largest Black production company in Hollywood next to Tyler Perry, who produced movies like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and Denzel Washington's Fences. So I'm proud of the students that I've been able to teach over the years. Did my PhD in psychology from the University of Chicago.
Okay. Got that. So of course I know once you said, well, they're not in here yet. My MSU viewers, they're going to definitely be, up. You're there right now, right?
Oh yeah. I'm teaching a course in a few weeks, in fact.
On psychology?
Psychology, theories of personality. Anybody looking at this from theories of personality, you'll get a preview.
Okay, got you. But okay, so we're gonna start back what we were talking about in the back for those who didn't see. And what I asked you was, for the viewers that are now watching, I asked was, me and my dad was talking, and which he's a lot older than me, he should be, and he was talking about going through school. And you said you did your PhD in Chicago, and as a society, why don't we hear more about the chairman, Fred Hampton, than why basically when this movie came out, this is the first glimpse that really society got to see what this brother was all about. So why do you think that?
I think it's because he would inspire young people. People have to keep in mind that Fred Hampton, at the time of his assassination, was only 21 years old. And he had united all of the major gangs, organizations in Chicago at 19 years old. I came to Chicago in July of 70, 7 months or so after his assassination. And I could not believe the people who had just gathered around him, ideologically speaking. And so if the government, they'll give us Malcolm X, who helped organize. They'll give us Martin Luther King, who helped us organize. And going way back, Garvey is another person they consider as being dangerous. But if you ignite ideology, especially organizational ideology, among young Black people like Fred Hampton, if you expose the world to him, they will. Some young person someplace will say, boy, if he did that at 21, 20, and 19, I can do that now. So you'd have a lot of young revolutionaries.
Okay.
And that's why, J. Edgar Hoover, who we portray in the film, said that, it was always this feeling of the rise of a Black Messiah. And during various stages of J. Edgar Hoover's rotten career, he thought it was Martin Luther King. Going way back, he thought it was Callie House who espoused reparations. And then he also thought it was Malcolm X, and he definitely thought it was Fred Hampton.
Okay. So you like you said in the back, you did the research for Ryan Coogler and those guys on this movie.
Yeah, Charles King was one of my students when I was teaching at Vanderbilt, and Charles King knew Ryan Coogler, the director of Black Panther. So I was sitting at home one night and my phone rang. It was like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I saw it was from California. And when I picked up the phone, they said, "May I speak to Dr. Winbush?" And I said, "Yes, this is he." He said, "This is Ryan Coogler." And I said, "Well, the only Ryan Coogler I know about is the one that directed, Black Panther." And he said, "Well, that's who this is." And then I said, who is this? I thought it was one of my students at Morgan playing a joke, but it really was him. And he told me that Charles had, shared with him that I knew how to do research and, kind of Black nationalists. And he said he wanted to do a film about a real Black Panther. And he chose Fred Hampton because of his youth. And he was surprised that a lot of young people didn't know about him. So we had dinner, and him and his lovely wife, Zinzi, in Chicago a few weeks later, and he asked me to do the research for the film. So we tried to make it as accurate as possible. We changed some names deliberately, of course, but it's a very accurate film. And we were happy that it won a couple of Oscars.
Okay. Well, speaking of the film, so I have to go, to the antagonist of the film, William O'Neill. And the film, I understand. I mean, when a lot of people, when they talked about it, after the film was over, said you took out a person only for like maybe 2 or 3 years that you were going to do time for.
Yeah, he was paid approximately for all of his work with Fred. He was paid about $600, and he took out one of the. I consider Fred as being one of the top 5 Black leaders of the 20th century. We had thought, a lot of the criticism of the film was that we put too much emphasis on William O'Neill, but the fact of the matter is, Rob, we rarely do a film about those who betray us.
Right.
And like someday somebody's going to do a film about Clarence Thomas, or somebody's going to do a film about Benjamin Carson, who lives in this city where I am now, Baltimore.
That's where I'm at too, brother.
Right. Okay. And if you look throughout our history, even going back to Denmark Vesey in 1822, our movements have often been betrayed, but we don't talk about why they betray, who they betray. We know that the person that took pictures of Dr. King, almost every major picture of Dr. King that has lasted, was working for the FBI. We know the man that breathed in Malcolm's mouth when he was assassinated in New York was working for the New York Police Department and was pretending to be his bodyguard. So we wanted to make a film about betrayal. And, and as well as Fred Hampton, so that, it would start a dialogue about why are these people in our midst? How do we deal with them? And most importantly, how do we get rid of them?
Well, I'm guessing that's where that saying come from. It be your own people.
It does, and it is. I mean, see, I'm still amazed how right now, and I'm not going to name any names, but I did name Ben Carson and Clarence Thomas, but we have other people that we know mean us no good. Okay. They're in our communities. They're in churches. They're in organizations, and we still tolerate them. And these people ultimately can betray us, and many of them have.
Yeah, well, I guess that's just the nature of it. I guess it's that crab in the barrel syndrome, or I'm loyal to something else because you're not loyal to your people, so.
But we use the crab in the barrel. I'm glad you brought that up as a saying. We use the crab in the barrel analogy a lot. And we put the emphasis on the crab, like why they pull each other down when they start climbing out the barrel and all of that. But sometimes I wrote this someplace. we need to talk about the barrel. Like,
Right.
how did the crabs get in the barrel? In fact, what is the barrel? And why do the crabs want to get out of it? And I think the barrel is the system of white supremacy that engulfs all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And crabs, we are pulling each other down because we're trying to get out of that system. And in fact, it may be very difficult, if not impossible, to get out of it. So then the next question is, how do you cope with it? There's a Ghanaian expression that says, a fish does not know it is wet. And so we're swimming in white supremacy. And some people, like one of my colleagues said, they're trying to make a more, most Black people are not trying to get out of the system of white supremacy. They're trying to make a more comfortable place for themselves in it. And I think we need to have what I call, and others, counter-racist strategies, not anti-racist, but counter-racist. And there's a very big difference between those two terms.
Okay, so for those that might not know, can you explain the counter versus anti?
Well, anti sounds like there's a popular book out now called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I take issue with the idea of anti-racist. Anti-racist means that we're going to get rid of racism. The only people that can get rid of racism are white people. Black people can't get rid of racism. And it's clear to me, at least, if you look at the past 500 years of history, that white people, they're not trying to get rid of racism. In fact, they're trying to expand it. We can see what happened on January 6th. We can see the response last year to the death of George Floyd. We can see the murders of people like George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. So I don't think white people are trying to get rid of racism. That would be, if they did, that they would be creating an anti-racist system. And again, I think the election of Donald Trump, in my humble opinion, showed that they were not interested in it. Counter-racism means, look, we are in the system of racism as a Black person, and we are going to say, what do we do if they do that to us? And one of the persons that has influenced me a great deal was Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who was a very dear friend of mine. I wrote a book about her just a little over a year ago. And Mr. Neely Fuller, who talks about what do you do in a system that you know white people don't want to get rid of, and that many Black people have succumbed to it. That's counter-racism.
Okay.
You may disagree with me or somebody, that people say, well, Black people can get rid of racism. We haven't been able to do that in the past 500 years. And when white people get up one day and say, we are not going to be racist anymore. See, I personally don't think that we will one day be saying, remember when we had racism? It was back in the
day.
Yeah, back in the day, we had this thing called racism. And then the child said, Mommy, tell us what that's all about. Right. I don't think we're going to ever get to that point. Now, white people can get rid of it. But again, I don't see them, and me, unless some white folk, I don't know that many white people said, my job is to get rid of racism. I just don't see that.
No, that's that. And one thing that was like blatant to us this year, and I don't hate any race, color, or creed. So, what I'm going to say is we've been, at war, for 500 years with, the other man, but incident happens in Atlanta, and, the Oriental people get an executive order.
You're right. And with all due respect, I think they, it's not that it isn't deserved that they do, but the better question is what you just said. How come we haven't gotten one? We still, after Ida B. Wells lived 130 years ago. We're still trying to get an anti-lynching law in this country. We have not been successful in doing that. And again, with all due respect to those, Asian sisters that were killed down there, I'm glad they passed it. But we can't get the same thing. I mean, and so there's clearly an anti-Black racism that runs deep in this society. Dr. Welsing talks a great deal about that. Chuck D, my friend, who wrote a chapter book, had that album called "Fear of a Black Planet."
Black Planet.
And they are free. I just saw a new book about physics called "Fear of a Black Universe." So white people even, took the title of a book and expanded the idea, in physics at least, that there's a fear of dark people on this planet.
Yeah, I mean, hey. But when I look at it, though, what that happened, to them women down in Atlanta and, the protective order that happened from, President Biden, I start to look at, like from a political power structure, from the United States with, Asia, China, so I'm like, maybe I could be wrong. Like, maybe we're going to give you this protective order because we don't want to damage our political structure with you guys to see that your people are getting murdered in America.
Now, I think that's part of it. But I also think that, this idea of Asians being what they call an ideal minority, that's their name, or they've been called that because they don't shake up the system the way Black people do. Asians, I mean, this appellation of they are an ideal minority means that, they go to school, they usually are very high in their class. And I'm not talking, stereotypes or anything else like that. They don't boycott, they don't march, they don't ask for reparations. They just kind of get along, and, and they stay in their, segment of the communities, be it, Chinese or Indians or whatever Asian group. So I think what white America wants from us is to be passive with many of our Asian brothers did. I remember when the women got killed in Atlanta, I saw a lot of Asians on TV saying it's time for us to organize better than we have. And see, this country doesn't like, people that oppose the system of white supremacy, like Geronimo or Cochise, or Sitting Bull. Now with them, they said, look, you're not going to take our land without a fight. So they killed them almost to the point of genocide, then placed them on reservations. Black folk, we have always been a thorn in their side because we really believe those words that the so-called founding fathers wrote in those documents, like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, that all men, not women, not Black people, not Native Americans, were created equal. We believe that as Black people. Ta-Nehisi Coates, he says in his book that, and I'm glad that he's getting ready to teach at Howard University. He says in his book that America will not be America until they own up to what they did to Native people and Black people in the form of reparations. Okay. So in my opinion, I don't think white people will ever be, in this country, will ever be Americans. Because Americans say that you follow the ideal in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And, last summer, Blue Lives Matter. But in January,
that's what I was going to go to in January.
Yeah, they were beating up cops. I said, what happened to Blue Lives Matter? They killing cops, beating them up, spraying them with bear spray, which I still don't know what it is exactly. All of this stuff. So when did Blue Lives Matter? I mean, this country is full of hypocrisy. And I'm not just being rhetorical, it's full of hypocrisy. And his Ta-Nehisi is built on a tremendous amount of lies and myths.
Right. I mean, I guess blue lives only matter when it comes to African Americans or, you know, people of color. White on white, blue lives don't matter as much.
That's right. That's right.
And
we see, it's funny if, like Malcolm said, history is our best teacher, not one of our best teachers, but our best teacher. And so I had a lot of my students at Morgan, during the pandemic, they said, well, after the George Floyd thing, they were saying, well, we got a lot of white allies right now, and this thing is we're going to become anti-racist now because we got white allies. First of all, that's another myth, because the only time in American history that white people have fought white people on behalf of black people is during the Civil War. And that was good for about 12 years until the Compromise of 1877, when Rutherford B. Hayes said, look, I'll pull all the troops out of the South, give me the election. And they did. And we had this, small white supremacist group called the Ku Klux Klan. And as Du Bois and others said, this was the lowest point, in American history for us.
Right. And then at the same token, a lot of people, they rave this whole thing about at that time with Abraham Lincoln. Nah, I mean, what happened in that is he wanted to really send us back. He just didn't have the money to send us back. So what else could you do but say, okay, let me release him then? Because I don't have really the money.
I don't have any money. This thing about slavery is kind of dividing the Union up. I mean, he said in his debate with Stephen Douglas, he said, I would never think that black people, and he called them Negroes at that time or colored or whatever. He said, would never think that black people were equal to white people, So he never thought that. So because he didn't have the money, Rod, to send us back to the continent, he said, look, let's give them 40 acres and a mule. And they did actually, if you look at when Sherman issued that field order number 15 in December of 1864, up until Lincoln's assassination in April, they distributed 400,000 acres of land to us in North and South Carolina and parts of Georgia, and as soon as, Abe got shot at Ford's Theater, Andrew Johnson, his successor, the vice president, which other than Bill Clinton and this idiot that we just got through with Trump, he took all of those 400,000 acres back that they had distributed and said that the people who had suffered most because of the Civil War were the slave owners and the plantation owners. They had suffered the most, not us. They had suffered the most.
Right. And also we talked about earlier that people they don't mention, they don't tell us a lot about, they tell us about Harriet Tubman, but they don't tell us much about Nat Turner.
And then remember when the brother made the movie a few years ago, man, Hollywood did everything to just, I don't think that Nate, I think he made one film since then. They did everything. I know he was married to a white woman and stuff like that. But, the thing is, because Nat is dangerous. Nat said, Charles, what's his name? I'm blocking his name. But we made a film about Nat Turner a few years ago. It's online. It's called A Troublesome Property. Charles Burnett. We did this like in the late 90s and stuff. And in the film, we went down to Southampton County where the rebellion was. And we interviewed black people who were descendants of Nat, and we interviewed white people who were descendants of those 66 people that Nat killed.
Right.
Those white folks are still mad at Nat. They still mad at him. This is 180 years later. They still, man, Nat should have done. I killed him, and there's a place there called Blackhead Crossroads, and we filmed this in the film, and it used to be called Niggerhead Crossroads because when they killed Matt, as you know, they decapitated him, skinned him alive, and put his head there as a lesson for everybody. But see, Nat told the people, look, if you don't, we're going to kill everybody. We're going to kill the men. We're going to kill the women. We're going to kill the babies. And he said, if you ain't with that, step back. And of those I think we said it was 118 people who showed up for the rebellion, all but 60 of them, stepped backwards. They said, I can't do that. And then Nat was dangerous. Malcolm was dangerous. And they made a stamp out of Malcolm, and Spike did his film on him in the 90s. But in general, those are heroes in our community that we don't talk that much about. We don't know that much about Martin Delaney. I always said if I made a film, I would make it out of Ida B. Wells Barnett, who was probably the greatest newspaper woman that ever lived. And the work that she did in Memphis and in Oklahoma and stuff. So, white people will give us his story. And what we've got to learn is our story about who our heroes and sheroes are.
Got you. And what you just said, crossed my mind is the same thing what Harriet Tubman said. What you said, Nat said, either you with me or not. And, Harriet stated, I could have freed a lot more if they didn't know,
She said, I freed 1,000 slaves. And she said, I could have freed thousands more if they had known they were slaves. And what she was talking about was the mind. She kind of echoed what Steve Biko said, the South African revolutionary who was killed in his cell during the 70s, when he said the greatest weapon, not one of the greatest, but the greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed, is how you think. And Harriet was saying that when she was talking about, the same thing,
Right. So I want to go back a little bit because you did speak on Black Panther. So I want to get your take on, the protagonist and the antagonist. You had, rest his soul, Chadwick Boseman, T'Challa, and then you had Michael B. Jordan, and his character. And what I took from it is like Michael B. Jordan was telling the whole truth during the whole movie, but I felt like this is how real Africans look at us, African Americans, how they left him for dead. And then he came back and basically said, I want to take over, and we could take over this whole planet, with our weaponry, with our technology. But, T'Challa wanted to keep it all in-house.
Well, see, my hero in Black Panther, the first one, my hero was Killmonger.
Right.
When he walked in that museum and that almost the first scene in the film, and he said, "Where's this from?" And that white woman said, "Where this from?" And she was wrong. And he said, "Well, I think I'm gonna take that." Because it belongs to us.
Right.
What is it? The greatest garage sale on earth would be to empty the Louvre in Paris of all the art, and then go to the British Museum. And then we can hit some over here in this country. And so Killmonger in the movie represented, as far as I'm concerned, he represented Black nationalism. We said we need to do for ourselves, and I'm not putting, the brother T'Challa down or anything like that, rest his soul in real life, but in the film, but he kind of represented the turn the other cheek strategy. Let's stay away from the world. So, I didn't think that he was the villain. One of the people that criticized that I read said, well, Killmonger worked for the CIA. He killed the dude in the CIA. You remember his ultimate goal Or you could argue that he was the spook that sat by the door. You know, he learned all of this stuff, and then he went and said, now I'm going to liberate my people. Just like the antagonist in The Spook That Sat by the Door that Sam Greenlee wrote years ago.
He infiltrated him.
I had no problems with Killmonger. And that last speech that he made when he was dying, you know, when he said, I forget how the exact words went, but that's a powerful speech, you know, right now. And African people, regardless of where we are in the diaspora, you know, we usually talk about the past and we definitely talk about the present, but we need to talk about the future as well. And I guess that's where I don't want to say new Afrofuturism movement is coming from, but it's where a lot of us need to talk about what will Black folk be doing 20, 30 years from now?
Right. What we'll be doing. Will we ever get to unify like we need to?
And that's probably the age-old question that we need to, you know, I mean, when we talk about Black unity, I think we got to qualify it a lot because, I mean, people like my generation in the 60s, I mean, we had, the thing that troubles me now about the issue of unity is I think, and this with all due respect to your generation, I don't think they really understood what happened in this country 50, 60 years ago. I was kind of saddened last summer when I saw young people marching with signs during the demonstration for George Floyd and Breonna, that they were holding signs that this is not your grandmother's civil rights movement. And the reason why I was saddened by that is because they probably have been fed a steady diet that the major leader during the 60s was Dr. King, you know, and then they show the March on Washington and they boiled Dr. King down to 4 words, you know, I have a dream. So then Malcolm got reintroduced to them and they boiled Malcolm down to 4 words, by any means necessary. And I ask young people, have you ever heard of the Republic of New Africa? No, I never heard of them, Dr. Winbush. What about the Deacons for Defense? No, I never heard about them. What about the Black Panthers? Yeah, I know about the Black Panthers. Do you know about the Black Liberation Army? They broke away from the Panthers because they thought the Panthers were too mild. Then I say, well, do you know Assata Shakur? Oh, yeah, I know Assata. Well, she was part of the Black Liberation Army. You know, so I think the vision that many young people today have of the 60s was that we were all just marching and singing, we shall overcome, and we weren't. There were a lot of Black nationalist organizations, you know, Return to Africa news organizations. And so history again becomes our best teacher.
Right. Yes, that definitely does. So, you know, we go back and, you know, see what was going on back in the 50s and the 60s and, you know, Miss Shakur and, you know, her fleeings over to Cuba and, you know, things like that, you know, so I'm guessing history will teach us, I guess, you know, that everything we trying to unify that way, but I guess it's like too broken apart right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got to search our own history. You know, one of my good colleagues, Runoko Rashidi, made his transition about a week ago. And one of the last things that Runoko wrote was that we have no excuse anymore not to know our history. There is more knowledge available for African people globally about what happened. And we don't need white people telling us our history anymore. We can tell our own stories. The internet, you know, besides Black bookstores, which I know are declining because of Amazon, but we have more available history right now to study movements, to study issues of unity. I'm going to give you another fear that I have. We had a lot of different organizations in the 60s. You know, the Black Panther Party, I named a few of them.
Yeah,
Now it's that if you and me, Rod, and 3 others went on a corner, we would all be labeled as being members of Black Lives Matter. and this is with all due respect to Black Lives Matter, but I think that it's like right now everything is homogenized into that. We need groups like the Black Panthers. Now, there's one group, I can't repeat their name on the show, the No Effing Around Coalition, I think it's called. No Effing Around Coalition, in fact. But we need people talking about the use of firearms for self-protection. You know, we got our guns pointed towards us, but we need to be prepared to protect our communities. So I think that we have to look at another strategy than we just, marching and stuff like that. Because marching is, whatever on that.
Got a question. Should we have African-centered schools like Chinese and Jewish children have on Saturdays?
Absolutely.
Or what about homeschool collectives?
I think we can. The reality is, an educator, the vast majority of Black children right now are being educated in public schools. Absolutely. There's a lot of support here in Baltimore. There's several Black institutions. Of course, we have a little over 100 Black colleges in this country, but I think it's interesting that during the pandemic that a lot of Black parents turned to homeschooling of their children. I remember I see somebody talked about freedom schools in Texas. Freedom schools, I went to freedom school when I was a kid, like in 1962. The churches in Cleveland, Ohio, where I was raised, said we're going to boycott the schools, the whole public school system. And the churches opened up and we went to school for the duration of the boycott. I don't know what happened to the boycott, because that's one of our most effective tools in this country. The Montgomery bus boycott being the model for that. And, I don't see why we don't boycott a public school system so that we have more alternative schools. I know people are setting up African-centered charter schools and so forth, but why don't we tell these public schools that they have to present a more African-centered curriculum to our children? They tried to do that in Philadelphia. The white folks have opposed that. Why can't Black studies be required by every public school in the United States and get teachers that are trained in that regard? Those are some of the issues I think that are today. Because if you lose the children, you done lost everything. You've lost everything.
Yeah, well, that's basically, they are the future,
They are the future. They are indeed.
They are the future. But what was I going to say? I didn't got lost in train of thought. I think somebody was going to ask a question. But to touch on the thing what you said about brother, not Nate Turner, but brother Nate who made the movie, you talked about him being married to a white woman. Right. So what's your stance about like interracial dating? Like, just interracial dating, period.
Well, I've never dated a white woman, so I wouldn't know personally.
I'm just saying what's your stance.
No, I'm just kidding. Look, I know I'm gonna set off somebody. I mean, we gotta talk. Should we talk about Serena? Should we talk about Nate? What was the brother that played Nat Turner?
His name is Nate. What is his name? Because he did a movie. He did the movie where they took over the police department a couple months ago.
Yeah, I'll think of his name in a minute. Frederick Douglass's second wife was a white woman.
See, and me and my homeboy, he took political studies at Morgan. He went to Morgan. He always tell me, he said, anybody want to talk about Frederick Douglass was the most powerful man in America because he had the president's ear. Black man anyway. He had the president's ear.
Right. He had the president's ear. He had a white woman on the other hand. I visited about 3 years ago. I visited Frederick Douglass's grave up in. I do these annual Black trips, and I visited his grave up in Rochester, and he's buried there, and his wife is buried near him, but he's close to his first wife, who was his Black wife. Okay, I'm gonna give you my personal opinion.
Speak, brother.
My personal opinion is that when you're involved with a white person sexually or marital wise, that you're compromised. And the compromise is that white people will look at you and say, well, that brother can't be that bad. Yeah, Nate Parker, somebody just put it in the chat. White people will say, well, that's a brother that can't be all bad. So they'll elevate him or her if it's a sister.
Stature.
Right. I just think that the salvation of the most important group in the African community, I'm talking about globally, is the Black family. And that's why they always attacked us. If you've been to Ghana, Senegal and Ghana, I visited those dungeons. It was really interesting in Ghana at Cape Coast Castle. They have the male dungeon on one side of the courtyard, and on the other side of the courtyard is the female dungeon. And right above the female dungeon, and I've got a film of this, is the church. And on Sunday afternoon, our guide, who was an African, said that on Sunday afternoon after church, the white men would come down to the dungeons where the women were and rape them in front of their husbands, in front of their brothers, in front of their uncles, husbands, everything. And so to split, that's why that's why the worst thing that happened on a slavery plantation, and I call them labor camps, but on labor camps, was not the beating or even the castration, but the greatest fear that the so-called enslaver had was to say, we're going to sell you. It's that famous scene in Roots where Kizzy Kizzy is sold from Kunta Kinte, and they're screaming for they did not, and we did several interviews years ago. In fact, in my book, Should America Pay, we did a interview with the Hurdle brothers. They were in their 90s. This is about 20 years ago. And they talked about the idea their father was enslaved. And they said that he always talked about being sold and how the separation occurred. So I think the ultimate separation is when a brother or sister leaves our community and marries somebody white. That's my personal opinion. So, and I could say more, but I won't. But I think that, go ahead.
No, well, I feel is us as people, when you decide to, like you said, sexual relations or, go through marriage with, opposite race, you marry not just them, you marry their people as well. What you just said. So obviously he not that bad, that brother's not that bad. So you come through to be acceptance, basically. And when you do that to be accepted, marry, outside of your race, that already puts the numbers down from with already like 5 or 6% of actually Black women actually get married, in this country, some type of way, whether it's heterosexual, homosexual, they get married. But like you said, they break up the Black family. And also when I think about that is like, social class. We are the only, and I was having this conversation, I was driving home and I was stating like, we are the only people that will marry down. White women do not marry down. They marry up. They marry up. And the thing I said when I was on the phone and I had quoted Kanye West, and I was like, when he get put on, he get married to a white girl. And what did he wind up doing?
He got married to a white girl. You probably saw that thing that went viral last week when Alfonso Ribeiro, the guy that played Carlton on the Fresh Prince,
I saw it.
He was talking, I don't know why Black people don't reject me. And then they showed the video of him in a nightclub. I don't know if you saw that. And he said, when I leave the club, I got me a blonde white woman or something on my arm. That's why and see, look, I know some of the sisters might get mad for me saying this, but when a brother marries a white woman, he's got to be jumping over sisters. You
Right.
see, because the availability of black women, because of what they've done to brothers in this country, is so large. So you gotta be looking at black women and say, I'm gonna jump all the way over them, then I'm gonna marry me an ugly white woman. That's the only way you can be doing that. Now, sisters will say to me, well, Dr. Wimber, there's a shortage of black men. What do we do? Y'all marrying these white women, and the numbers are not the way people think. What's the name? Farah Kajai's book, Don't Believe the Hype. There's a lot of myths about us. Black men are, well, let's put it, 8% of black men marry white women. 4% of black women marry white men. It's, sisters and brothers are marrying people. And this idea that mostly, when you get famous and rich and an athlete, an entertainer, you marry a white woman, that is also not true. There was 94 or 92% of black men that make over $100,000 a year, they marry black people, but they parade those who have married white men. That's why these commercials, every time I turn on, see a commercial on TV, there's some kind of white man with a black woman or a black woman with a white man, and the white boy, he's holding the little black girl's hand. I mean, and all the black people got curly hair, because they want to, and they're light skinned,
Right.
So that's the brainwashing that this society likes to lay on us. And unfortunately, we believe some of this stuff about us that just simply isn't true.
Right. See, but that's the thing, coming up, I guess as people, African Americans, black people, I guess in our household, our parents, I guess, don't talk marriage, as far as like our counterparts do. They're taught to marry. I guess we're not. I'm not sure, but
No,
I did want to give it.
That's true what you just said. No, it's true that since, 1990, black men and black women are marrying less than they were 50 or 40 years ago.
Yeah. I mean,
so I interrupted
people
you. Sorry.
No, you're fine. But no, what I was going to say after that was, basically we see the portrayal of the sister being married to the white guy, because they're married. But in all actuality, though, African American men date more out of race than anybody. They just don't seem to get married to them.
Well,
they just date.
Well, but there's a lot of, there's statistics on both sides. You're right. And most white men that date black women don't marry them either. They'll have sex with them. I think there's that scene in Jungle Fever where, there's this saying that you're not a man. Spike Lee is talking to the owner of the pizzeria, and he says, well, in our community, the Italian community, said you're not a man until you've had sex with a black woman. That's true. The Italian guy said that's true. And so white men will have sex with black women, but most of them will not marry a black woman. Brothers will have sex with a lot of white women and other women as well, but they won't marry them either. It's like, what's that old saying? Forbidden fruit is forbidden fruit is often sweeter, or something like that.
Yeah.
I saw somebody said they wanted me to talk about the warrior method, which is a book I wrote, a few years ago. Just real quick, it's a book about raising healthy black boys. And Will and Jada, Smith donated some money to me to, to help teach the method around the world. And I've been doing that for years. It's called The Warrior Method. It's a good book. That's the only plug I'll give my books tonight.
So where can we get The Warrior Method from?
You can get The Warrior Method. See, boy, I tell you, this stream thing goes backward. That's The Warrior Method, and it's a plan for raising healthy Black boys. I always try to say buy it at a Black bookstore, or you can get it on Amazon. Push comes to shove.
Is it in Morgan's bookstore?
It was last year before the pandemic, so I don't know. I don't like using my own books in my class because it seems like you're tripping, But that's another discussion.
Yeah. That definitely. I mean, I guess you didn't want to use your own words because you become biased to the book,
Right,
that you've written.
Yeah.
So that's what somebody asked about the Warrior Method. Someone asked about Black women can't be successful without a white counterpart on TV shows, i.e., How Did I Get Away with Murder and Scandal?
Yeah, and see, those are brainwashing shows. Now, here we had a successful Black couple in front of the whole world, Barack and Michelle Obama. I didn't agree with all this politics, but here's a successful man with a successful woman and a successful Black woman with a successful Black man. But these shows like Scandal, my students told me more, Doctor, you got to see Scandal. I looked at one episode of that mess. And you can't hold meetings anymore on Thursday night, because everybody looking at Scandal. And on Wednesday night, what was that other show? Empire. Was it called Empire?
Yeah, Empire.
Yeah, and I mean, why? Is that what they're poisoning your minds? And I'm not trying to tell people not to look at TV and the only thing you look at is PBS or something, but those shows are for brainwashing African minds to make you think. Well, like the person said, the only way you can be successful is to marry a white man. That's just not true. That's factually not correct. And but they want us to think that way. So like I said, I'm making a personal list right now of every commercial I see with an integrated couple. I don't buy the product, and that's all. I don't buy the product. Right. I just won't do it.
Yeah, I mean, because what you get on the Fox Next Black show, Our Kind of People.
Yeah, and it's some kind of mixy, what I call mixy show. Everybody all mixed up. See, that's what they want us to think, that somehow if you reject your man or reject your woman and marry one of us, everything going to be all right. It's just not true. I've heard Black folks say things to me like, well, if everybody in this world were integrated, everybody just marry everybody, there wouldn't be any more racism. And then I turned to him, I said, look at Brazil. Everybody marry everybody down in Brazil, and the white folks are still, treating them bad. The black Brazilians now are talking about Black power and stuff like that, because they realized that was a myth. And see, white people are a minority.
Right.
I usually ask Black people, what's the percentage of white people on earth? People like, 30%, must be about 40%. I had one did a thing up in Canada. This white boy said white people were 70% of the world's population. White people only comprise about 8% of people on earth. Only 8%. 92% of people on earth are either Chinese, African, Indian. I mean, just those three groups alone comprise more white people more people of color. So this idea that, you got to ask, how did 8% of the world's population control the minds of 92% of the world's population? And again, is what Biko said, the greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressed is the mind of the oppressed.
Okay. Well, I see you, D. Martinez. You talk about successful Black couples. We had them in the 80s and the 90s. We had, 70s. You had George and Weezy. You had Bill and Claire. You had those, but I guess those shows today don't sell.
They don't sell. They try to get both audiences, you know. So they said, let's put a black person up. There's some show I was glancing at the other day. It was a white man with a black woman. I forget it's a takeoff of that show. What's that show that comes on? It's on ABC. Blackish.
She's just put mixed this.
That's what it was. And this white boy running around married to this fine sister, and people just gobbling that stuff up. That's crazy. It's insanity.
It's crazy, but
I made somebody mad in your audience, but go ahead.
Well, and listen, that's one thing. Rest in soul, Paul Mooney. One thing he always said at his shows: somebody's going to get mad and leave.
I'm sure somebody get mad on this one too. Okay.
Well, if they get mad, they get mad. They'll be back next week.
Yeah.
They'll email me or Ava and say, "Why would you know that?" Because we had a Caucasian lady say, "Ask me how do I marry up?" I mean, you could be one of the Kardashians, one of the biggest come up artists in the country.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, you sent Kanye crazy. Lamar Odom OD. You sent Bruce Jenner to a woman, made him to a woman. Like, like how much more evidence do we need?
But we don't see, if you look at, like I said, the 500 years of our sojourn in just the United States. I ain't talking about Brazil or any place, but just in the United States. All history testified, like I just don't trust people classified as white. And and black folk have not been that wrong about trusting white people. Every time I'm in the audience giving a workshop or something, white people raise their hand. But Dr. Winbush, you just don't seem like you have any sympathy for white people. What about John Brown? They got to go back 150 years to this crazy white man who, I mean, what he did, that's wonderful. But you got to go back 150 years to talk about a white man who'll give his life for black people. And so, this idea that somehow we can trust them to see us through to the promised land. We're the only people that say that. You won't see a Jewish person saying that about the Palestinians, or the Palestinians saying that about the Jewish people. They believe that they've got to get their own liberation. And, so that's it.
I mean, last time we trusted some white folks, we ended up on a boat here.
That's right. That's right. And that's why I don't like the term white allies, because an ally sounds like he supports you or she supports you, but it's at a distance.
Yeah.
And I hear young black folks saying, we need white allies. You for what? They're going to be temporary. They've already done, I think it was Pew Research Foundation did a survey and said that many of the white protesters in last summer 2020's demonstration have kind of, moved away from that. That was a thing for last summer. But now they didn't move on to other things like water polo and stuff. And, so black folk got to quit trusting them like we do.
It's just enough to get your guard down, and then they go ahead and jump in. I guess it was like, if it's beneficial for me, I'll do what I need to do to, get my benefits out of it. But after that, I'm not doing with it no more. Yeah, I guess that's how they look at it.
Yeah, I'll put it on my resume that I marched in the summer 2020 with black protesters or something like that. So one of my students sent me this video the other day. It was this white European woman. I forget which country she was. She had married a Maasai man. And she was living among the Maasai in Tanzania. When I was over there a few years ago, the Maasai are some of the most uncontaminated people by Western culture. They still dress in their traditional dress. And this white woman was in the middle of this Maasai village talking about she understood, everything about And I was just looking, I said, okay, why did the brother marry her in the first place? He had to be jumping over again other Messiah women to marry this white woman.
Mm-hmm.
So you see it.
What she looked like? Because I'm pretty sure she didn't look like nothing. Because that's the one thing about, when we go in, we just get anything.
Well, I'm gonna say amen to that.
Oh man, thank you for Dr.
Okay.
I don't think anybody said anything. Well, DeAndre, who's a Morgan grad, he said he bought the last copy of your book, The Warrior Method,
Thank
on
you, DeAndre.
Amazon.
Thank you.
He's a Morgan grad. He bought it. I don't think I missed anybody's question. Oh, they were damaging property during the George Floyd protests.
They were. White people were.
Somebody said Black studies cannot be taught because they will cry that it's CRT.
Well, see, we should have spent a minute on that, though. Critical race theory, which no white people don't know what it is.
You got 5 minutes. Go. We can go over.
Let me just say this real quick, because there's an attack. Nicole Hannah Brown that did the 1619 project. She's on her way to Howard. And I can say this now, she stopped by Morgan because Morgan and Howard, and I think FAMU, but I'm sure Morgan and Howard both have schools of journalism. So she's going to be teaching there along with Ta-Nehisi Coates this fall. I'm glad she rejected. But there's an attack on the 1619 project and critical race theory, because it's essentially saying we don't want you to learn what we did to you. That's basically what it is. The second thing, what they're calling critical race theory is not critical race theory. First of all, you don't get critical race theory until the second or third year of law school if you're going to law school. So I saw this white girl crying, I don't want my daughter who's in the second grade to learn critical race theory. Well, you don't have to worry about it because she won't. But what they're really saying, we don't want you, Black people, to learn and teach our children about what our ancestors did to your ancestors. And the last time they banned literature like this, all these laws about CRT and the 1619 project, 200 years ago, when this country started banning anti-abolitionist literature, they don't want us to be liberated. They don't want their children to start saying, Ma, I found out that Abraham Lincoln was a racist. They don't want that. I found out that Thomas Jefferson was a pedophile because he raped Sally Hemings when she was 14 years old. They don't want that. CRT, critical race theory, is not what people say. I brought Derek Bell, who was one of the founders of critical race theory, to Vanderbilt when I was teaching there. And with critical race theory is very simple. It basically says that racism underlies law, all law, and extending that, like Francis Cress Welsing said, racism underlies every major institution in this country. Every institution. I can talk about education, politics, religion. This idea that Jesus is white, we ain't got time to talk about that either. But all of those things are critical race theory, that racism underlies everything. So we'll, stop there.
Well, yeah, we could stop there, but if you got some time, you could always come back and we could get into.
Invite me back and we'll talk about critical race theory and why white people don't like us. Okay.
Well, because they're yelling for it in the chat. They say, "Can we get a part 2, CRT part 2?" I'm all for it.
Okay, I'm down. Just I got a crazy schedule, but we'll hook it up. Okay.
We'll hook it up. I'll definitely keep in contact with you. Able keep in contact you.
Okay.
As well. DeAndre said he bought the last book from Amazon.
Oh, Amazon be lying about that stuff. They got plenty of them books.
You got any other published? You got any other books that you published that someone might want to read something else?
Well, yeah. I mean, here's one right here. This is called, some people, this is my worn copy, Should America Pay some people call this the Bible of Reparations. Just like, but if you don't know anything about reparations, you can read this book. I've got another book, Belinda's Petition. Belinda Royale was the first Black woman or first Black person to petition for reparations in this country in 1781. And my latest book is by Dr. Francis Cress, is about Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. And it's a book dealing with the 9 areas of racism and white supremacy. And I got somebody who knew Dr. Welsing and, well, and they wrote a chapter. So Chuck D, for example, wrote the chapter on entertainment. Dr. Jeremiah Wright, Barack's old pastor, wrote the chapter on religion. So it came out last year. And all of my books are on, you can read all of them on Amazon if you got to, or in a Black bookstore.
Gotcha. And also they could peep your YouTube channel as well, correct?
Man, I didn't know I had that, man. I don't know. What it is, there's not that many like Black nationalist faculty at either, definitely not at white schools, and a few of us at Black schools. So I just try to keep it real. That's all.
I understand. Always keep it real. So we'll set that show up,
Okay.
for myself. Dr. Ray Winbush, thank you for coming. Thank you for
Okay,
responding
Rod.
to Ava's email and coming. And we'll definitely have you back. You go
Okay.
ahead.
You keep doing what you're doing too, brother. It's very important.
Always, Ava's, the whole creative mind behind it all, this whole historically Black college university network.
We'll keep it going. The HBCUs are important institutions. Absolutely.
Yes,
all right, brother.
All 107 of us.
That's right. All right. Take care, brother.
All right, you too. All right, see y'all next week. I don't even know what's coming on next week. I lost my schedule. Sorry, there's no I Be Damned tonight because I didn't want to get into it, but I'll give you a synopsis of what happened in the I Be Damned that was supposed to be played tonight. Basically, he got her pregnant, left her, and went with another chick and kicked her out the house. She had to live on the street. Some crazy shit that happened in Connecticut. So with that being said, I am Rod. Thank you for chilling with us for an hour, Dr. Ray Winbush. I'll see you next Wednesday with something. Got to check my schedule. Love, peace, and soul. And make sure you go pick up the book, The Warrior Method. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in to Amsterdam Talk. Thank y'all. God bless. Good night.